let's take a check in here on where we are. So the idea is we're selling heavy on equities, and it's a buy bonds kind of thing. It's definitely tech that's taken the blame, but it's
market, particularly the NASDAQ and the Russell 2000. In fact, it's the biggest daily performance gap that we've seen in more than a month. The NASDAQ, of course, dragged down by Salesforce as the ultimate growth stock.
It fell to 2%. The previous reading was 2.5%. So this is a great chart over the last 5 years. You can just see how we're kind of rolling over a bit. However, growth in disposable income was marked up to 1.9%. That may bode well then for spending down.
Close here on this Thursday afternoon with Kate Moore, head of thematic strategy and global allocation team over at BlackRock. Kate, great to have you here in studio.
Yeah, great to be here, Romaine.
Let's start off, I guess, talking about today. You have some stocks doing great. You have other companies like Kohl's doing poorly. Is there a tie that sort of binds all this together?
It's been really difficult to say there is one specific trend around the consumer. I mean, this is the challenge. You get a cross current every day, and then the market trades on that.
Head of thematic strategy and the global allocation team over at BlackRock. She's going to stick with us. When we come back after the break, we're going to have a deeper conversation with her about what's going on out there. We're also going to take a closer look at those shares of Salesforce, which are plunging today here on the back of that very concerning forecast.
All right, shares of Kohl's plunging the most on record. And here's probably why. The CEO, Tom Kingsbury, saying on the conference call earlier, quote, our customers continue to be pressured by a number of economic factors, including high interest rates and inflation.
And positioned well in casual dining. And so what we're seeing from the consumer at this point, and part of the reason why the first quarter may not have been exactly what people expected, what they were really surprised with is our sequential.
We have some breaking news for you. Apparently, the U.S. is reining in AI chip sales to the Middle East by NVIDIA and AMD. The U.S. is worried about the technology getting diverted to China, and they're worried about that large-scale AI accelerator shipments to the Middle East and then eventually going to China. It's unclear how long this review will take. There is also not a concrete definition of what constitutes a large shipment, so there are much more questions than answers, but the stocks are moving on that. NVIDIA stock is down about 2.5%, right around those session lows. Romaine?
All right, one of the big movers out there. Let's take a look at some of the other movers here. Our top calls, the big movers on the back of analyst recommendations. And we start off with Corning here. An interesting move to overweight over at JP Morgan, which says cyclical and secular tailwinds lining up favorably.
Go-to-market changes, it can exacerbate some of the macro issues as well.
All right, hey, Jason, thanks for jumping on with us. Really appreciate it. Jason Salino over at KeyBank Capital Markets. It just depends on when we get that trough, right? It's going to be really hard for these stocks to find their footing when you have all the money just going to AI, unless you can offer both.
Yeah, and that was the big question here. I mean, when we saw Salesforce's earnings, I think everybody was so rattled by
News that just broke, Romaine, is that the U.S. is apparently reining in AI chips that are being sold to the Middle East by NVIDIA and AMD. They're worried that that could be a gateway then to China.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by this and also not surprised. I mean, given, of course, how the approach they've taken with China, it sort of made sense at some point. This is the countdown to the close. Romaine Bostic alongside Alex Steele. With about 10 minutes until we get to those closing bells here, and stocks right now at session lows. Of course, the biggest drag right now in the tech space with the NASDAQ down more than 1%.
Yep, and you can really blame NVIDIA for that. It was already the worst performer with Salesforce also down by over 20%, but now NVIDIA catching a bit to the downside, also down over 4%, so really picking up that steam. The Russell 2000, though, outperforming all across the board. Yes, off the highs. Yes, rolling over as NVIDIA rolls over, but nonetheless eking out that gain of 0.7%. That's not a world where the consumer is doing poorly if the Russell 2000 is up and outperforming.
At what price and what the sort of the contours of the terms are.
Absolutely.
I guess somebody's got to, make sure that, Sherry is happy and and this thing will go away, whether it ends up with David Ellison or with some of the competing bids from
a little bit of nuance, but we think it's ultimately.
But it gives us something to talk about. Another person to talk about is not necessarily a huge name outside of the world of fashion, but this is a big deal here for Calvin Klein. Veronica Leone has been named a new designer here for the